Artillery. I mean, I could just stop there, and most folks would nod in agreement. Nobody in World War II enjoyed it either, that is, unless it was raining down on the enemy positions. Then it was okay. Anecdotally, I used to be a surveyor artillery in the army in the 1990s, and we had L118 105mm towed howitzers. I have a bit of an understanding of artillery, albeit a bit rusty. It's fun to watch the rounds impacting, but after a while you get sick of climbing hills on foot with 50 kilos of kit just so someone can shoot straighter. In the definition of artillery, it can include mortars, anti-aircraft or anti-tank weapons. For example, the infamous 88mm anti-aircraft gun was repurposed as an anti-tank weapon and also used against anything on the ground at all, including non-mounted infantry if necessary. One of my favourites is the Japanese Type 89 50mm light mortar, or knee mortar. I am curious as to how many knees and legs were smashed thinking it could be fired from the knee. Much of the artillery was actually horse-drawn or human-dragged, which I can tell you isn't fun. If you only focus on the US and German World War II artillery pieces, in a pure artillery sense, and forget all other nations, Soviet Union, I'm looking at you here, there is still a large range of artillery that was used. For the Germans, some examples included the 10.5cm Leichtfeldhaubitze 18 or light field howitzer. They had 22,000 of these built. This was the most common of the light field howitzer series. Notables included the LEFH 16 and 1840 and the self-propelled versions that appeared from 1942. The 15cm SIG 33 or Schweres Infantry Gesetz 33 or heavy infantry gun. God, my German's terrible. It was the standard German heavy infantry gun used in World War II. There were about 4,600 of these built. It was unable to be towed above 16 km an hour due to solid rubber tyres and the lack of springing. The 7.5cm Leichtes Infantry Gesetz 18 or 7.5cm Leig 18 or infantry support gun had about 12,000 built and used in the war. The crew were protected by an armoured shield but no shirts, attesting to the short range of 3,500 metres or so. The Schwere Gustav or Heavy Gustav was just a giant railway gun designed to blow up the Maginot Line. It turns out, although the weapon wasn't actually ready for the assault, it was easier to just go around the Maginot Line through Belgium. Again. Calibre was 80cm or 31 inches, and during Operation Barbarossa it did manage to destroy a munitions depot 30 metres underground. It's the heaviest mobile artillery piece ever built. The 15cm Schwer Feldhaubitze 18 or SFH 18 heavy field howitzer or Evergreen had 6,500 built during the war. This is what you're actually going to use in Hell Let Loose. Some examples of US artillery included the 75mm pack howitzer M1, designed in the 1920s as a gun that could be broken down into several pieces and carried by pack animals. Generally used by the Airborne or US Marine Corps, there were over 8,000 of these built. The 8-inch or 203mm gun M1 was a towed heavy gun with over 32 km range. Reach out and touch someone. The 155mm gun motor carriage M12 was a self-propelled gun developed during the war, mounting a gun derived from a French cannon. It was built on the chassis of an M3 lead tank. There were over 100 of these built. It was known as the door knocker as it could penetrate 7 feet of concrete at up to 1,800 metres. The 105mm M101A1 or M2A1 howitzer was developed post-World War I. The aim was to replace 75mm howitzers, but by 1933 only 14 had been manufactured. Large-scale production of this piece began in 1940. There were a total of 8,500 built during the war, had a range of 11 kilometres. And the M114 155mm howitzer had 10,500 built in its lifetime. It's what you'll use in Hell Let Loose. If you enjoyed that very brief tour of history of a small part of the artillery used during World War II, well, let's now head off and learn how to use it to blow stuff up with impunity in the game. Originally, I had a really large video script ready, including information on the maths and physics behind artillery operation, but that makes the video too long, and these vids are supposed to be informative and enjoyable. So to compromise, I've included some information in the video description for you to read in your own time, and on the screen in a second will be the summary information from that. The video still goes into a bit of depth. If you're after a quick and ugly 5 minutes, either check out my ex-wife or one of the many artillery videos that profess to make you the ultimate artillery player, and good luck with that. I've watched a couple of these videos and they are clearly aimed at hunting subscribers for monetization, and they make some bold or inaccurate statements as a consequence. My favourite quote is something along the lines of, "I've watched all the artillery videos and none are any good, so at the end of my video you'll be an awesome artillery player." Yeah, no. You need to learn and practice that shit. I'm going to make some assumptions here that you know the basics of how artillery works in-game. In summary, the two positions are gunner and loader. You know all of the keybinds. Loader can traverse the entire gun. Gunner can traverse barrel 15 degrees only. There are two types of ammunition, both cost resources, munitions. You cannot swap ammo after loading. The gunner has bearing information at the bottom of the screen and elevation on the left. Rounds have a flight time of around 20 seconds or so. Choosing the officer role also allows you to communicate with squads and command when you're actually on artillery. And the blast radius is about 25 metres from impact or a 50 metre splash area. There are some other tips and points for consideration. Firstly, smart players will jump on a vacant server, perhaps with mates, and practice artillery to learn how to use it properly. The less intelligent will jump on a fully populated server, team kill, and then argue that the team should be more careful. Yes, I watched one Muppet do this very thing recently, a consistent team killer with artillery, practicing on a live server. If you're going to lay artillery on an area, communicate it clearly, including in text chat, if you remember. This is really important when your team is on the assault, as the front line can shift quite rapidly. Noting rounds take about 20 seconds or so to arrive, you need to really consider how danger close the danger close might be. If in doubt, don't fire. When conducting a fire mission, you should aim for a salvo of 3 to 5 rounds and then check the result and then either adjust fire or start a new salvo elsewhere. This is a bit subjective because there are a few options here. For example, if you're conducting defensive artillery fire, then you might want to continually suppress a zone to halt and continuous enemy advance. If you're conducting support fire for a team's advance, maybe smoke, you might want to walk fire forward of the advance itself. Both of these might require more than 3 to 5 rounds. This stuff takes a bit of practice and requires careful consideration of your calculations and the movements of your team. If you have someone observing your fire, you can adjust based on their feedback. And you'll see footage of this in action later on in my video here. Alright, here's a practical example of an area suppression barrage. I'm going to talk through it. So we picked a center aiming mark at whatever degrees and mils elevation. Then after the first round, we quickly reloaded and moved our bearing 2 degrees to the left of that center aiming mark, which actually moves our impact point 56 meters on the ground at 1600 meters range and less for shorter distances. And then we fire, and then we move 2 degrees to the right of that center aiming mark, which is 56 meters across to the right hand side, and fire again. Then we go back to the center aiming mark and we adjust 10 mils long, which would mean that we would aim our impact point to be 42 meters further forward, and then we fire, and then maybe we bring it 10 mils short, which is 42 meters shorter of the center point, and fire. Our total splash area would look a bit like a plus symbol, elongated left to right. It's roughly 212 meters of traverse left to right with 50 meters of depth. And then when we went to the elevation one, it was 134 meters of depth with 50 meters of width. That's actually how the maths works out. It's probably somewhat stressful for anyone in that area anyway. It's a fairly big beaten zone. You can make up your own patterns anyway, however you wish. There are two main methods for calculating bearing and elevation to the proposed impact point. Here I've got an airhead and I'm putting smoke cover in. So what we're doing is we're placing markers on the map or using someone else's markers. In this case, I'm using my own. Then you calculate the bearing and elevation to that marker. You look at the distance to the marker and you adjust the elevation to match that. Remember, 1 mil is 4.2 meters roughly. And then once you've got that elevation adjusted, you can fire your rounds down range. Fairly simple, that one. And the other thing you can do is use an online calculator, and there are quite a few around, including this one here that even seems to let you select the map, which side and gun you are on, and then once you actually click on the map, it generates data for both the loader and the gunner to adjust to. Now, some folks might say that this is not in the spirit of the game. For me, the jury's actually out on that, as I've led call for fire missions in the real military, and we use every single map and tool and calculator that we can get our hands on to generate the most accurate fire, because it might be landing close to our own troops. Given my previous comments on the dangers of errors in calculations and said troops, and just the randomness of Muppets, one would suggest that any tool available that reduces the amount of friendly fire would be more than welcome, wouldn't it? Anyway, that's one tool. There's another one here. You can actually do a quick calculation thing, and there's a whole bunch like that out there. Google them yourself. It's entirely up to you. I don't have an opinion whether you use it or not. On top of the actual calculation stuff, there are a couple of other factors that I'll raise with you for shits and giggles that you need to grow and develop to improve your skills. The first one is knowing the map. But this is not just about artillery, this is generally speaking. You need to learn and understand those enemy lines of advance and the likely garrison and outpost spots. This knowledge takes time to acquire. Here in this example, I'm using the commander's recon to spot the enemy as they run towards that central objective so that I can actually aim better. Knowledge about where the enemy come from and stuff takes time to acquire, but you can start by watching where your team puts stuff as well. The better artillery players are able to predict enemy activity paths and interrupt those paths. Other things to think about, well, if you're conducting artillery battery fire, in other words more than one gun operating, please communicate and coordinate. Otherwise you're probably just wasting resources by all firing at exactly the same spots. I would use the map recon to your advantage. When the commander sends up a recon, have your gun trained towards a likely enemy area, and then when those raspberries actually appear, train your gun quickly to the appropriate marker that you set and fire. You can fire pretty much straight away. You should almost be on target already, so it won't take much adjustment. The last two things, communication. I probably don't need to say any more about that one. And then don't just shoot for the sake of shooting. Fire in salvos or groupings and see what the effect is by communicating with your team. Perhaps get someone to call your fire and tell you where it's landing. Artillery is relatively simple to operate, but a little bit more challenging to actually master. Mastery can be interpreted a couple of ways. Some think that smashing an area is mastery. Yes, I just pounded that area, everything died. Whereas you can actually be quite surgical in your placement artillery if you understand the maths behind that. Either way, the most accurate artillery relies on good maths and target indications and an observer to let you know how your fire mission is going and map knowledge. So get a bit of teamwork into your artillery play. Do some maths and you'll do as well as some of the better players out there. It is actually pretty awesome when you conduct a fire mission of 3 or 4 rounds and then you find you've racked up double figures in kills as a result, or even more importantly, when your team's going, mate, that artillery was awesome, thank you, you saved us, or something. Now for a bit of a demo on some single gun artillery fire, mostly on demand from teammates, as well as predicted or suppression fire calculated by myself with a loader. I hope you enjoy it. Artillery going in Charlie 6 and walking forward to Charlie 5.
Did you guys being hacked
We're capping highway, we were capping highway now.
What? Infantry, you should be able to push up a little bit.
We're on highway, this would be a perfect
India, watch
opportunity
out.
for tanks to move.
India, artillery landing, danger close, 50 metres in front of you.
Sick, thanks. We took out a Gary here, so.
Bravo, can you back cap so you could get the
Kilo,
attention? We're being
November.
engaged
Pushing
by
down
them,
into highway.
but they're just using
have
a
any riflemen?
really strong line on us.
Kilo, November, watch out.
Negative.
Arty coming in on your position.
Let's press T, man,
If
you
I-
can see.
Put a round inside there.
There's ammo in West Bend if you want to run the.
You want a Gary in my marker? Somewhere near D6.
Charlie Squad, could you get
I'll quickly
Iron to
change
give
out.
Abel
I'll go
some
on.
bed?
Say again for I run, please.
Oh no, it's like, do you think
Abel
there's
tank
a suicide one here?
Abel's tank.
Okay,
I've
I
got
don't
the
have.
Stand on
Abel
the
defend
move
marker
marker.
as my tank.
I'm just redeploying Nothers.
We can cross over to you. Be a machine gunner. So this is a really good position here.
We have 3 tanks front of West Bend with another
That was
2
the
on the way.
worstest recon play I ever
Oh
had.
boy. Baker squad's pushing in hard on highway though, which is good. Should distract them a bit.
Alright guys, start making your way forward. Happen on that.
Break this stalemate that we've got going.
Tanks forward, infantry's command, and just keep supported. Keep supporting. Brace, fry, game, command.
Just look at the map, guys, where the artillery markers are. That's where I'm dropping them.
Okay, tank went down. Okay.
Yeah, 76. I put a marker on it.
Contesting West Bend.
I got enough for a tiger. There we go.
Yeah.
The enemy tank is
garrison
destroyed.
down. Enemy garrison down.
Understood.
Good enemies back here, do we?
Charlie 7, enemy garrison down.
Yeah, just kill one guy. Hearing several others too.
Bravo, we are trying to make a way to you. It's
On
just,
ping,
you
building,
know,
behind building
attacking out,
line.
attacking forward. Not easy.
Watch out on highway still, which is
Squad
good sign.
commanders, just be aware I'm walking after fire forward.
Enemy OP on ping as well.
There's like a house C6. Can we get some arty on that or something? I think there's a like an enemy garrison there.
Whereabouts, sorry mate?
C6.
On your map, bottom of C6, close to C7, there's a building, like a house. I think there's a garrison there.
We got too many guys there and
Yeah.
tanks. I'm not going to
Numpad 2,
artillery to take
C6,
One
numpad
close.
2. I put my
Fair enough.
artillery mark on it.
I'm not going to artillery that commander because it takes too long for the arty to get there and there's too many guys
Yeah.
waiting around for me to shoot.
Understood.
One close.
Copy.
Tank crews, you need to stop blowing up. I'm running out of the field.
Close.
Yeah. I'll do my best. Blow up more.
I'm dead.
Hey, they got it.
us.
Push my building.
Good
What
job,
the
guys.
hell?
Everybody push up.
It's
Back.
lucky.
I fucking. So good, so good. Sorry to the light tank. All I
Get that
saw was
tank shooting.
a small tank running around the field. No
Turn
tags.
2, 159, 159.
Maybe not.
Okay, all squads. What I'm going to do is put a couple of HE rounds in the front of Bastogne, and then I am going to smoke the shit out of it.
That squad, I'm dropping a box down. Can you get that Gary up? Oh, item.
Stand
Yeah, I
by
think
to
that's
go
good.
to smoke in 4 rounds.
Roger that.
Oh, I just got 2 killed.
3,
Enemy tank here, Mark. Here at highway.
2, last one.
Smoke.
Wait, wait, wait. Load properly.
Smoke's going in thick and fast, bro.
Understood.
Just take it in.
Already behind, sweep and
They
clean.
knocked us with. This is an 88, isn't it?
Clear.
Tank on
Yeah,
highway, on markers. On the strong flank. Oh, that smoke's beautiful.